Hi, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy, and I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And our topic for this stream is Republican policies are lethal. Now, I have to start off by saying that I do admit there are some Democratic policies that are lethal too, but the article on which this stream is based compares the Republican policies and the Democratic policies. So the basic point of the article is that the findings of this empirical study show that Republican policies are more lethal than our Democratic policies. Now, I guess I'd have to add to this that since the Republican Party appears to be becoming more fascist as we speak, that it may be true that Republican policies will be becoming even more lethal than they've been up to the present. So anyway, if you like, well, I guess I'll wait a while to undertake that one. But let me see your comments. Hi, Dolores. I see you're here. Thank you. So I'm going to share the article. Wait 1 second. I have another piece I have to share before I start today. Oh, by the way, John Fetterman has raised $2 million since his debate with Dr. Oz. Which, of course, was immediately reacted to by people extremely critically, saying that John Fetterman lost. Well, if he just raised $2 million for ads, I'm not sure that he lost. In particular, his ads now seem focused on something that Dr. Oz said during the debate. So whether he lost or whether he won the overall debate may not end up being as important as this ad, which hammers Dr. Oz for what he said about abortion, and specifically local politicians getting involved in abortion decisions. Anyway, moving on. Bonnie asks, do the men have ovaries? I don't think I'm going to answer that one. So the report we're going to hear about now was from Virginia Commonwealth University. The article is from Common Dreams. It's written by Kenny Stansel. Title is Republican Policies on Killing Americans, Study. It was written on October 26, just yesterday. The Republican Party's regressive policies are not just unpopular, but a new study out Wednesday suggests they're also deadly to those who live under them. Working age mortality rates have been rising for decades across the United States, but premature deaths are more pronounced in states where, quote, conservative, unquote, policies predominate, and less common in states that have adopted more, quote, liberal, unquote, policies, according to peer-reviewed research published in PLOS 1. If we don't have the proper regulations in place to protect people, then what happens is that they could be exploited. In fact, they could be exploited to death, I think. Policies that expand state power, policies that, quote, expand state power for economic regulation and redistribution, protect the rights of marginalized groups, or restrict state power to punish deviant behavior, unquote, were defined by the study's authors as, quote, liberal, unquote, while those with opposite aims were deemed, quote, conservative, unquote. Seems like a sensible definitions to me. For 8 policy domains: criminal justice, environment, marijuana, gun safety, health and welfare, private labor, economic taxes, and tobacco taxes, the authors scored state-level measures that were enacted from 1999 to 2019 on a 0 to 1 continuum, with 0 representing the maximum conservative score and 1 the maximum liberal score. Using annual data from the National Vital Statistics System, the authors calculated state-level age-adjusted mortality rates during the same time period for deaths from all causes and from cardiovascular disease, alcohol-induced causes, suicide, and drug poisoning among adults aged 25 to 64. When they merged the data on working age mortality with data on state policy contexts, the authors found that liberal policies were associated with fewer early deaths among 25 to 64-year-olds between 1999 and 2019. So this was all pre-COVID, which is interesting. Changing all policy domains in all states to a fully liberal orientation might have saved 171,030 lives in 2019, the researchers estimate, while changing them to a fully conservative orientation might have cost 217,635 lives. So if I add those two together, which seems like a legitimate thing to do, no, I shouldn't really do that because that's probably lumped into the change to conservative orientation. I don't want to double count. Study co-author Dr. Stephen Wolf, Director Emeritus of the Center on Society and Health at Virginia Commonwealth University, told USA Today, quote, as an academic who does scientific research, I studiously avoid talking about politics in my professional work. But the data are pointing us to that as a determinant of health. Even after controlling for state-specific environmental conditions and demographic characteristics, the authors found that states that invested more in public education and economic security had lower working age mortality rates than states that gutted workers' rights, environmental regulations, and access to health care, including abortion. Quote, if a state policymaker were to say to me, it's unfair to criticize my state because I have a low educated, low income population, I would ask them, why do you have a low educated, low income population? Lead study author Jennifer Carras Montez, a professor of sociology at Syracuse University, said to USA Today, quote, it's because of your policy environment. Demonstrating how state policy contexts influence individual behaviors associated with premature deaths, the researchers observed, quote, especially strong associations between certain domains and specific causes of death, between the gun safety domain and suicide mortality among men, between the labor domain and alcohol induced mortality, and between both the economic tax and tobacco tax domains and CVD mortality. Now, what is CVD mortality? Cardiovascular disease mortality. Of course. Darrell Gaskin, a health economist at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, said that some people like to think about working age mortality as failures of individuals, that they eat too much or use drugs, but that's all in context, unquote. If we don't have the proper regulations in place to protect people, then what happens is that they could be exploited, said Gaskin. Quote again, we always get the promise from conservative states that we're going to cut your taxes and regulation and make the environment better for business, and it comes with a cost, unquote. With the midterm elections less than 2 weeks away, experts say it's important for working age Americans to know whether they are voting for officials who support right-wing policies that increase the risk of early death, or those who favor humane interventions that can help people lead longer and healthier lives. As Wolf put it, the conservative policies associated with higher working age mortality revolve around, quote, helping the private sector to thrive in hopes that the economic gains would trickle down to those who need more assistance, while the liberal policies associated with lower working age mortality focus on improving economic fairness and social and environmental well-being. With their efforts to impose anti-union right to work laws, ban abortions, and curtail Medicaid, and their insistence on ignoring gun violence and life-threatening climate crisis, Republicans have firmly established themselves in the camp that is actively increasing premature deaths among the nation's working age population. Although there's a wide range of positions among Democrats that stretch from more progressive or less so, lawmakers in the party are overall much more likely than their GOP counterparts to support life-affirming public goods and services of the sort detailed in the study. The analysis precedes the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, which has killed Americans at a significantly higher rate than people in other wealthy countries. While the nation's deadly for-profit healthcare model, lack of paid sick leave, and other federal policies associated with 40 years of bipartisan neoliberalism have received much blame from progressives. Studies show that state-level Republicans' lackadaisical public health measures and the GOP's anti-vaccination propaganda have also exacerbated suffering during the pandemic. Yes, please. So what do you think of that? It's pretty straightforward. I don't know how pronounced the relationship is. Okay, I see the conclusions here. Okay, I don't see the study data. So it's hard for me to comment on that. Hard for me to see how overwhelming the relationship is. But let's see what we can find out. Hmm. There are lots of authors of this particular study. I'm looking things up to see if I can get a better impression of the strength of the relationships. Let me make the print a little larger. There are some interesting numbers in this. For example, Americans have a life expectancy of 78.8 years in 2019. We died 5.7 years earlier than people living in Japan, the global leader. God, that's amazing. Life expectancy, the life expectancy gap is now close to 6 years. Of course, there's a life expectancy gap between ourselves and the Canadians. And that's 3.3 years. And we die 2.5 years before our closest geopolitical allies in the United Kingdom. Shockingly, our life expectancy falls between two middle-income countries, Cuba and Albania. That's amazing. Anyway, I am looking for some specific statistical tests and measures of the strength of relationships found by those statistical tests. I don't see anything on that yet. So let me see what I can find here. This will take a more careful reading than I can give it right at the moment, but it does look like the relationships established are reasonably definite. That they, if you look at the levels of the statistical tests, it looks like the relationships are likely there. So I think I'm going to leave it there. This deserves a more careful reading from everybody, I think. I left the link in the description so you can look at it for yourself. Anyway, I think that's about as much as I can do now. So I think we can take this study as being suggestive. I'm sure it needs some more research to further confirm the relationships. It's probably safe to say that, but it's worth exploring by beginning with the article, certainly. Because if true, it gives a pretty good rationale for not living in a conservative political environment. So I do think that's of some interest. So it's now roughly 1:08. Thank you for coming. I'll be back in a very short time at 1:45. And at that time, we will discuss. At that point, I'll discuss a new study from Lancet suggesting that a healthy human future is still possible if the world ditches fossil fuels. So I'll see you in a little while for that stream. Again, thank you for coming. Do go to my Patreon account at patreon.com/Joe_Firestone, or do go to my Please Buy Me a Coffee account, which is at buymeacoffee.com/Joe.Firestone. So again, thank you very much, and I will see you again shortly.